Click the bell icon to get latest videos from Ekeeda.
Hello friends, today we will discuss about what is a network operating system and what are the remote operations that can be performed in the remote of the network operating system and what is the disadvantage that is associated with this network operating system. In the network operating system, which uses the users who are aware of the multiplicity of the machines. That is, they can use remotely the resources of other machines either by logging into the remote machine, either by copying the resources from the remote machine to its local machine. Now it can be done in various ways, and the most important modern operating system, like even the embedded operating system like Android and iOS, are now the network operating system. So first we will know that how to remotely log into the computer system. Say for an example that any site or the computer host at say Vermont Institute of Technology want to access a file which is at a Yale University, say cs.yale.edu. Now the user at this Vermont University can log into this Yale University's account and access the files of that account other than copying it back to the local instruction. So first it needs a SSH server to get connected to the particular cs.yale.edu. After having this connection, it can then use the access of the resources on that cs.yale.edu. So to get the connection, it uses the command ssh space cs.yale.edu. So this SSH server will now create an encrypted socket connection between the local machine at the Vermont College and the machine to the cs.yale.edu. Now after the connection is established between these two sites of the host, then a transparent bidirectional link is being created from the process of the user at the cs.yale.edu. So that every character sequentially get from this user to the process at cs.yale.edu, and after performing it get back exactly the result to the again user. Now once the connection is established and the link is been created, then the user is prompted for a login ID and password. If the successful user ID and authentication password is given, then the proxy is created for the remote server to get access of the particular cs.yale.edu. And then it can access the machine's operations or the resources just as like the normal resources of a local machine. So in this way, a machine or a host can remotely log into another machine and then can use its resources or files as per as it need for a project or its own individual purpose. The next one is the remote operation on that particular accesses. Now other than logging into this particular remote machine's computer, the remote machine can also get copied the resources from the server to the client. Say for example, we want that a Vermont College is cs.uvm.edu now wants to get a copy of a file which is fixed location at cs.yale.edu. Now first it need to get it copy of the file and then it can access in its local instructions easily. So every remote machine maintains their own local files as well as a provision to get access to the remote files. So it uses a program like FTP file transfer protocol or a secure file transfer protocol or SFTP to first get connected over the file transferring or the file copying. So it can be thus using the SFTP space cs.yale.edu. And say suppose that the UVM machine wants to access a file, say the server.java that is resided on cs.yale.edu. Now after a connection on a FTP protocol is being made from the cs.yale.edu and the cs.uvm.edu, now this uvm.edu wants to know about the exact files locations or the directories that is specified the server.java. So after getting into the current directory of that file's location, then it uses the command get space server.java. Then only it get then a copy of that server.java and get it back into its local machine. Now it can access to the file as its local file. Now, while it is copying back this data file to this own local machine, we should know that the name of the location or the directory path is not transparent to the server or the client. So whenever a client is requesting for a file, then it must know the exact location of the file in the remote directory. Otherwise, it cannot access the file. And other than this, a problem with this remote operation that whenever the file is get copied, the original not file shared is happening here. Only a copy of the file is being made to that particular client. So there should be many copies for supporting many remote operations in this case. So the wastage of space is maintained. And other than that, whenever a copy is get modified by a local machine of the client side, then it becomes an inconsistent copies of that server side as a remote operation procedure. Now, as we can say that we are maintaining a copy of the file and a login account must be there in the cs.yell.edu to log in remotely from that UVM machine. Now say if the user has not any account in that particular uvm.edu machine. So now can that log into an account or can that remotely operate and process? The login account generally requires mandatorily an account to be held at this remote machine. But if they want to copy a file from another remote machine and does not have an account on that particular machine, it can have this so. Firstly, it has to mention its name as anonymous. And next, the file is to be placed in an anonymous directory under structure of that particular server-side machine. Now, when the operation is prompt into the login prompt, then it places the anonymous name in the login ID and an arbitrary password. After finding the anonymous name in the login ID, then it can include in the SSH server a non-secure connection between them. And after that, any file under that anonymous directory, say for example server.java, if it is placed in the anonymous directory, can be accessed by this holder or the machine which does not have an account in the server side. So in this way, an insecure copying of file can be done, but the files cannot be appropriate other than this anonymous directory should not get an access of that particular account holder. So if you do not have an account at the remote side, then you cannot get access any inappropriate file other than the anonymous directory structures file. So in this way, remote file operation is being performed on this network operating system side. Now, implementation of the FTP is very similar to the SSH server, that a daemon at the remote side is then executed to perform this prompt to the login account. And after the login is made, it can access to the account as normal to its local operation. But the only difference between the FTP and the SSH is that SSH can get the connection and make any of the operations that can be performed on the local machine. But the FTP requires only a predetermined set of operations that can be performed on that connection. So it can that include, first is the GET, that is a GET file copied from the remote side server to the client. Next is PUT, that is a put of a particular file back into the server side. Next is ls or dir, that is listing of the files or directories in the remote side. And finally is cd, that is changing the current directory of the remote side to get into the exact file's location. Now that FTP requires a special types of operation that is to be made, and SSH requires a special types of login commands or the issues of the language that should be particular about that only SSH server. Say for a Windows operating system wants to access another remote host machine which is running on a Unix operating system. So for that particular SSH connection from Windows to Unix, the host machine should use the language and commands used by the Unix rather than using it with the Windows. But it is very inconvenient for using different languages for using different types of remote host machines connected over network operating system. This problem is addressed in a distributed operating system which can use a same language even if the type of the operating system changes between the distributing systems. So that is all for the network operating systems. Thank you for watching this video. Stay tuned with Ekeeda and subscribe to Ekeeda.